This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. The Bild paper is probably one of the biggest mass tabloids, if not the biggest, in Germany, and it is also extremely influential. It's a daily paper, and of course they are going to show how the Germans feel, because obviously they want to sell their products and nobody would buy it, as they would always say things which the Germans don't agree with. So it's quite interesting to see what Bild Online has been talking about when it comes to the peace proposal regarding the Ukraine-Russian war. And Bild Online published an analysis by the Bild deputy editor Paul Ronsheimer on April 24, and that is what he wrote. Above all, there is one feeling that characterizes political Kiev these days: disbelief. For a long time, no one wanted to believe that Trump really seemed willing to give Russian President Vladimir Putin everything he wanted. But after Trump's peace plan was confirmed, everything changed. It has long been clear to Ukraine they cannot rely on the United States. The other question is, can Ukraine rely on Europe? Now that is a big question. We will come back to that later on in this program. Express wrote on April 24, Express of course a British paper, a British tabloid. The former Conservative leader, Boris Johnson, listed 5 rewards he believed President Putin was getting from the current US deal. He wrote: 1. The right to keep sovereign Ukrainian territory he has taken by violence and in breach of international law. 2. The right to control Ukraine's destiny by forbidding NATO membership. 3. The lifting of sanctions against Russia. 4. An economic partnership with America. 5. The chance to rebuild his armed forces for the next attack in a few short years' time. Mr. Johnson added, as for Ukraine, what do they get? Apart from the right to share their natural resources with the United States, which apparently is going to be a deal which might be signed today, they get nothing. What is there in this deal that can realistically stop a third Russian invasion? Nothing. Daily Mail, another very influential media in Britain, wrote this on April 24. It's 11 years since I watched Russian troops seize Ukrainian army bases in Crimea, while their president, Vladimir Putin, publicly denied that any of his forces had crossed the border. Following the first annexation of European terrain since World War II, the 2.3 million Crimean citizens of Ukraine faced a terrible choice: flee their homes or submit to Russian servitude. By showing itself to be an unreliable ally, Washington not only leaves NATO seriously undermined, but offers encouragement to China's grotesque dictatorship in its determination to seize democratic Taiwan. Putin feels emboldened by Trump's stance, especially given the US failure to approve fresh military aid for Ukraine. Now here's the important point which this article is bringing out. Britain, like the rest of Europe, can be under no illusion. Trump attempts to force an unjust peace on Ukraine. We can no longer rely on the United States. This is the sentiment throughout Europe. And so Europe realizes that since they cannot rely on the United States the way they look at it, they must build a very strong and powerful, independent war machine. And that is exactly what they are doing. The Sun, another British paper, wrote on April 24, currently America sends an unthinkable message. America allows murderers and murderous invaders to win. And that echoes what Bild Online wrote on April 24. They published another commentary by Franz Josef Wagner saying this: Trump wants to make peace with a murderer. What will become of Ukraine then? A slave state. President Trump, don't become a friend of a murderer, Wagner is pleading. Now, an interesting comment was made by Mr. Trump, which was reported by Deutsche Welle on April 25, saying this: the US has proposed a deal between Russia and Ukraine in which the front would be frozen where it is, meaning Ukraine would cede 20% of its country. US President Trump said Russia had made a major concession by not seeking to conquer all of Ukraine. Well, Mr. President, I want to say this very politely. That is not so. Major concession? Do we believe one moment that Russia will be satisfied with what they have conquered at this point? We will find later that Russia has put the world on notice. No, they are not. It's very clear what Mr. Putin has in mind. It reminds me of Adolf Hitler. He started by invading the Rhineland, the Saar regions, then he went into Austria, then into the Sudetenland, approaching the invasion of Czechoslovakia. That was when Mr. Chamberlain announced that he had talked to Hitler, and Hitler is a man of peace, and we will have peace in our time. Of course, shortly thereafter, he invaded Czechoslovakia and Poland, and then, of course, World War II started. But the point is, Hitler had put the world on notice all along. In his book Mein Kampf, he wrote very clearly what he had in mind, that he was taking one country after the other towards the Far East, ultimately Russia. All of that was clearly announced. The world didn't listen. Putin has clearly announced what he wants to do. He said the Soviet Union was a masterful power bloc, and it was a big mistake that this fell apart. He wants to re-establish it. Now look at the Soviet Union. Look at what countries, what satellite countries and nations belong to it. The entirety of Ukraine, not just 20% of it. It's very clear that Putin is not going to be satisfied with just conquering that part of Ukraine, let alone other countries. And so the Sun wrote on April 25, everyone says they want peace. So why is the war still raging in Ukraine? The short answer is simple. Peace means very different things to very different people. They have different goals and different motives. Putin wants total conquest. And he wants to be remembered as a modern Tsar who restored Russia's imperial greatness. Ukraine wants to survive as a sovereign, independent nation. Europe wants a chastened Russia and peace that lasts beyond 6 months. Trump just wants a deal, any deal at any price, with minerals thrown in for good measure. He wants to claim the glory and perhaps a Nobel Peace Prize for sorting out the carnage. Crucially, for Ukraine, there are no security guarantees. That means there is nothing to stop Russia catching its breath, rearming and invading again a few months or years later. And then it says, the American plan rewards Russian warmongering. Everyone says they want peace, but Trump is a leader who has made it a priority. He deserves to be applauded for trying to end the war. That is a truly noble aim. But what he needs to realize is that how the war ends matters. Just like with his New York real estate, there are good deals and there are bad deals. Of course, Putin claims he wants peace. Yes, he wants a piece of Ukraine until he wants the entirety of Ukraine. And then he wants a piece of some other nations, exactly as Hitler wanted a piece of the Sudetenland, a piece of Austria, a piece of all these different countries, until he had peace, according to his interpretations, conquering all those other nations. Trump gave an interview to Time magazine, which was published on April 25, and in this rather lengthy interview, he has this to say: Crimea will stay with Russia. And Zelensky understands that, and everybody understands that. It's been with them for a long time. But then Deutsche Welle wrote on April 25 that Zelensky reiterated that Crimea belongs to Ukraine, saying his position remains unchanged. Only the Ukrainian people have the right to decide which territories are Ukrainian. The Constitution of Ukraine says that all the temporary occupied territories belong to Ukraine and to the Ukrainian people, Zelensky said. In addition, when it comes to Crimea, Trump made an interesting admission. On his Truth Social, on April 26, after he had come back from Rome talking to Zelensky there, he says, no matter what deal I make with respect to Russia-Ukraine, no matter how good it is, even if it is the greatest deal ever made, the fading New York Times will speak badly of it. They wrote that Ukraine should get back territory, including, I suppose, Crimea and other ridiculous requests, in order to stop the killing that is worse than anything since World War II. It was Obama who made it possible for Russia to steal Crimea from Ukraine without even a shot being fired. So, Trump admits that Putin stole Crimea from Ukraine. So why then does he want to reward Putin by having him keep what he stole? Why is a request to return these occupied territories to Ukraine a ridiculous request? And how can the deal proposed by Trump possibly be characterized as a good deal based on what we already know? It's by far not only the New York Times which rejects Trump's peace plan. In fact, every single paper in just about every country outside the United States has been talking about the problematic of this deal. Now, some stronger than others. Even those who are in support of perhaps the deal admit, well, it's really not a good one, though. And so now the German defense minister made some interesting comments. MSN wrote on April 28, Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, expressed his concern over Donald Trump's proposals regarding Ukraine. The SPD politician stated that the suggestions of the American president concerning handing over parts of Ukrainian territory to Russia are too far-reaching. Ukraine on its own could have got a year ago what was included in Trump's proposal. It is akin to a capitulation, Pistorius said. And then he assured that Germany will continue its military support for Ukraine, even if the United States decides to hold it. If Ukraine fails, if Putin wins this war by taking Ukraine, or a large part of it, it will be a maximum threat to NATO territory and neighboring countries such as Moldova and Georgia, he warns. But ultimately, Europe will have to stop supporting Ukraine militarily, even financially. And that will not be a very good sign for Ukraine. Something very similar actually happened in World War II. Originally, Ukraine was part of the Hitler axis, if you please. They supported Hitler. They fought with Hitler against Russia. But then they realized what Hitler was really up to. And then they turned sides, and then they started supporting Russia. Something very similar is going to happen according to biblical prophecy when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, because ultimately Russia and Ukraine will unite. It will become one major power bloc, in addition to China, in addition to other Far Eastern countries. So what we are seeing right now is not going to lead to ending the status quo by upholding it. It's not going to happen. And so Russia made it very clear they are not going to agree to that anyway. The New York Post wrote on April 28, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov insisted Monday that Russia will accept nothing less than total victory over Ukraine. Lavrov rattled off a list of Ukrainian red line items and mentioned no willingness to make even the smallest concessions. Russia won't make any concessions. It appears like slowly but surely Trump sees that too, and he may even realize that his deal is not that good, but he may not openly admit it. But you see, the whole world is against this deal. And frankly, not just the deal. It becomes more and more a situation where the whole world is against the United States. We just had elections in Canada, and boy, did the Canadians, as some papers pointed out, humiliate Donald Trump insofar as their voting was concerned. The Bible makes very clear what's going to happen. And it's not going to happen in the way most people think. We have prepared a free booklet, Biblical Prophecy from Now Until Forever. And it also goes into the situation with those Far Eastern nations and how they are ultimately turning against Europe. That is prophesied too in your Bible. You only need to know where those scriptures are, and you need to understand them. So please ask for a free copy of our booklet. And until next time, this is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by The Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.